to COPE Café. This is Dr. Jorge Figueroa. I'm very happy to be here in Denton, Texas, in our first show on COPE Café. Today, we got a very special guest. We have our chair of the Teaching Education Department, Dr. Diane Myers. Hello, Diane.
Hello, Dr. Figueroa. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm excellent. Thank you for being here with us and accepting our first invitation to be our first guest in our first show. So you just are the first.
So thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're gonna have like just a chat about special ed, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the programs that we're having here at the institution, and also your recent trip to South Africa.
Great.
So basically, right now we're living in a society that have put apart most of the time everything that has to do with special ed. So basically, what is the state of special ed right now here in the United States?
Boy, that's a tough question to open up. I thought we'd make some small talk first, but I guess we're diving right into it.
Go into a topic.
I think, one of the things I learned from being in South Africa is that here in the United States, our special education services are really advanced compared to some other countries and developing countries. We have been moving towards more inclusive practices in the field of special education. Over the last decade, 2 decades, we've really begun to emphasize evidence-based practices when we work with students with disabilities, and I think that's been a move in education in general in this country. We're looking at more scientifically based research to drive the practices that we're using in schools. And in special ed in particular, I think we're really looking at the data in terms of which practices are most effective, which are going to work best with our students, and how we can really build capacity with our teachers to implement these practices with fidelity in a consistent way that's actually going to have improved outcomes for our students.
Now that you mentioned specifically your trip to South Africa, you were there for a huge conference.
I was there for the Division of International Special Education Services, the DISES conference, DISES. It was held in Cape Town, and every year they have this conference. It's in a different location. It's the International Division of the Council of Exceptional Children, which is our biggest professional organization for special education professionals.
Okay, so when you went there to South Africa, you had the opportunity to compare and contrast what we're doing here with what the rest of the world is doing.
That's right.
Like, how you saw that? What was your impression specifically with that? Are we that advanced as we think that we are? Are other countries like elaborating more instruction into special ed? What are we doing? Just comparing it.
I think in general in education we have a very different model than a lot of countries, especially countries that are in different places in terms of development than we are. So if you're looking at more developing countries like some of those in Africa, we're certainly able to provide a lot of services for our students that they may not be able to. For instance, I heard some presenters from Tanzania talk about how they have up to 200 students in a class with one teacher.
Wow.
So in some countries, if you have a very obvious physical disability, if you have a wheelchair, or you can't see, you're blind, or you have hearing loss, those kinds of things that are really overt disabilities, those will actually warrant services. So those students will get special education, but if you have more hidden disabilities, so those that aren't visible, like a learning disability or an emotional or behavioral disability, it's very hard to get services for those disabilities in some countries. And what I was there doing, I was presenting on behavior strategies for students with challenging behavior, and I was very heartened that the kinds of things that I'm talking about in terms of positive behavior interventions and supports and using the science of behavior to shape what we do with our students, that has global applications. So even the folks I was talking to from South Africa, from some of the African countries, and from India, I spoke to some colleagues from there. The things that we're doing in my field specifically in positive behavior interventions and supports, those are applicable across cultures and across contexts, which was really reinforcing for me to hear that. But in terms of resources, we have a lot more in this country than they do in other places.
Well, in other countries, some countries that I have visited, for example, when they talk about inclusive education or special ed, they're very far, in regards to moving a curriculum or maybe laws. Incredible, you know, and when I get the opportunity to travel, for example, I went to the Dominican Republic once with a friend of mine who was talking about the importance of adding ADA compliance into like the videos and all that. So yeah, ADA will be here, that type of compliance. But the process of telling the people like, hey, we need to put this inside of a video, you know, that was a little bit complicated because they were asking like, why I need to do that,
right.
You know? So basically that could be one of the things that you were able to see when you say like they're different.
Right, we think all countries have something like the ADA, but of course ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? So other countries don't necessarily have the same kind of rights, both educationally and just in terms of access that we do here in the United States.
Okay, so and that's one of the most important things here. So when we're able to compare and contrast what we're doing with what the rest of the world are doing, you know, or is doing. So one of the things that we're promoting in here in our classroom setting has to do with more integration of all these topics into it. And I think that our programs in special ed specifically, they concentrate in giving the opportunity to this learner to work into all this immersive or in all this innovation that has to do with special ed. So let's talk a little bit about our programs. So we have special ed in which divisions, in which areas?
So we have special education programs at all three levels really. So our undergraduate students who are studying to be either early childhood through 6th grade teachers or 4 through 8 teachers, they have the option to become certified both in the core areas and add on special education. So we have undergraduate special education courses that prepare our pre-service teachers to be effective special educators. We have courses in assessment, behavioral intervention, those are the courses I teach, and instructional intervention, and general special education courses that cover legal aspects of special ed and different disability categories. We have master's programs in special education. We have a master's of education that leads to educational diagnostician certification. So diagnosticians spend their time assessing students to see if they have special needs, assessing students who have special needs to see what services they might need, working with teachers to implement interventions. So we have a really successful diagnostician program. So students who are getting master's degrees can pursue either a master's degree with a focus on interventions or a master's degree that leads to diagnostician certification. And then finally, we also have a PhD program in special education leading to a doctorate of special education. And we're very proud of that. And my colleagues and I in special education have been working very hard over the last 3 to 4 years to get more students in that program, to increase the rigor of our program. What I think is cool about our PhD program is it really caters to students who already are working in the field. So they're teachers, they're diagnosticians, and they come to school part-time, but they're still able to complete rigorous doctoral work, they complete their dissertations, and then they're going on to become my colleagues in the field as higher education faculty members. Some are here in Texas, some are in other institutions. And we've been looking for ways to grow that and find opportunities for our graduate students to participate in research. And I know in terms of our program, I mean, my area, positive behavior interventions and supports, has been growing. You and I have had some conversations about thinking about culturally responsive education. And I think a lot of times we tend to be sort of isolated. Like, I'm special education, you're ESL and bilingual, and we don't. But really, learners don't just have special needs or just have English as a second language and need services. Like, students present with a variety of challenges, and I think a lot of the practices that we use cross disciplines, and we need to work more collectively to meet the needs of our diverse learners.
Yeah, I think the cross-disciplinary skills that every educator must have is influential. You know, like we've been talking about, like how important it is also coding. You know, as for our students to develop that nowadays. So the same thing had to do with special ed. The same thing had to do with ESL. You know, we need to have a holistic educator. You know, in order to deal with in the classroom setting. You know, if you were going, if you have the opportunity to change different areas that had to do with special ed, or basically like to add, you know, areas into special ed, specifically here in the United States, or, you know, which areas do you think need to be like enforced right now, like in the United States, to have a better special education program into the communities, into the areas? You know, what do you think is the need right now, and how do you see that progression?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think we really need more training for all educators, not just people that want to be special educators.
But into the area, in the specifics of special ed, Diane.
Well, I think, like I said, I think all of our teachers need more training in special education. And the areas that I would focus on in special education, of course, and I'm biased because behavior is my area, but I think students with challenging behavior are not just a special education issue, they're an education issue, right? You're going to have students with challenging behavior, some who have disabilities and some who don't. Sometimes students who struggle with the language have challenging behavior because they can't communicate effectively with their peers or with their teachers. But in terms of special education, I think if we're going to continue to move towards a more inclusive environment for students with special needs, if we're going to try to keep students with special needs in the general education classroom, if we're going to try to steer away from, for instance, when I was a teacher for students with emotional behavioral disorders, we were sequestered from the general education, but more and more those students are being included, and I think those general education teachers need more training, and we need to really work on our collaborative skills with teachers and make sure that our pre-service teachers can collaborate with a wide range of professionals. So special educators need to be able to collaborate better with general ed teachers, speech language pathologists, ESL service providers, bilingual service providers, medical personnel if necessary, juvenile justice personnel. So we really need to work on those collaboration skills. And I think in this country in particular, of course, autism has been on the rise for the last several years, and you see a lot of special education programs focusing on working with students with autism.
Well, would you say that they have forgotten about other programs then, or maybe that's the cool thing to work with right now, autism? You know?
Well, I know that it's got a lot of media attention right now, so I think there's a lot of money being put into research for students with autism, so there's an impetus for people in the field to move to, and there's more and more students being identified with autism, so I think, and part of that is we're getting better at identifying, right? Like autism has only been a disability in the federal law since 1990, so it's kind of a new disability, so we're really learning a lot about it. And some students who may have been characterized as intellectually disabled or with a behavior disorder are now falling into that autism category. So as long as those numbers continue to rise and we see it all over the news, we can expect more services to be directed towards students with autism. But another thing you mentioned is where I think the focus needs to go, and a lot of that is working with families and parents and guardians and kind of understanding the social construct of disability in terms of culture and different families and different, you know, there's diversity in disability as well in terms of the family structure and how parents and guardians respond to their child having a disability. So I think we as special educators and in education in general need to focus a lot of our attention on family-school partnerships and thinking about how to strengthen those. And that's something that my colleagues in Africa talked a lot about, because when we talk about education, in particular special education, it's very individual student focused. And Afrocentric philosophy is very community, right? It takes a village to raise a child, right? And they bring that approach to education as well. So in special ed, all of our students have individualized education programs, but that very idea of individualization is sort of not applicable to the culture of this Ubuntu, this African humanist community kind of philosophy. So we need to be thinking about how our best practices can look different across different cultures and how they can be applied in different contexts.
How the policies that involve special education should be better, like they should be better right now. What area should we put inside of the policies right now that are ruling, specifically the ADA policy?
Well, in K through 12 education, the federal law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, we really need to get that reauthorized. The last iteration was 2004 or in 2018. We really need to update that law with some of the new information and knowledge that we have. And we have had some slowdowns. Our education policy has shifted a lot. People are more concerned about financing now than some other things. So we're in this age of high stakes testing that has impacted us in special education in some very unusual ways. Not all of our students are equipped to take high stakes testing. There's different, the high stakes tests look different from state to state, so educators don't have some kind of national, we could do better with our policy, but again, I'm comparing it to other countries that don't even have policies, and I'm thinking about that as well, and I think, yes, we can be frustrated with what we don't have, but on the other hand, we really need to be grateful for what we do have and make sure that we're using that to benefit our students and to think about the outcomes for our students.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Diane. I really appreciate you taking the time and being here with me and our first COPE Cafe and sharing with our viewers, our internet, our cybernets, all this important information in regards to special ed. If there's anyone who's interested in learning more about the programs, what they need to do?
Well, I would invite them to either come and see us here in beautiful Stoddard Hall at Texas Women's University in Denton. We're here all the time and would love to have visitors. They can email us at teachereducation@twu.edu. They can contact me directly either via email or via phone. Our phone number in the department is 940-898-2271. Certainly all of our information is available on our website. You could follow our Twitter feed at TW Teacher Ed, at TW Special Ed. So there's lots of places to get information, and of course we're happy to meet with folks and talk to people at any time, really.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much for being
it's
here
my pleasure.
with me for the first time, and I hope that we can continue doing COPE Cafe. I think this is a great space to mention not only things but also to share ideas, to see how we can do better things into education, how we can move forward into the 21st century. I also want to thank our assistant producer Joseph for helping us in all this development of our first program, and hopefully we can keep on working together future programs in here, and we can develop more into this COPE Cafe initiative that we have started today. Well, this is Dr. Jorge Figueroa. Thank you for having me here, and see you soon.